Welcome to PLZ Soccer. We are joined by former Celtic defender Erik Sviatchenko as we take a look back at Kilmarnock's first leg Europa Conference League qualifier against Copenhagen and look to this week's second leg at Rugby Park. First of all, Erik, can you just tell us what you made of that first leg?
It was a game that they thought they would kind of cruise over, especially at home. They would kind of get those get the win and then kind of head back to the Superliga. But Kilmarnock really put up a really good display and showed character. So I think Copenhagen were a little bit surprised with the level maybe of Scottish football, and especially Kilmarnock. When you look at kind of within the league, I think they were a little bit stunned. And the performance that they put out was, of course, from Copenhagen's side, it was a lot of domination, but still wasn't what they expected. And now they, in the end, got the win. In the end, kind of the overtime where Rasmus Falk scored, it was kind of a very important goal going into Kilmarnock.
Second goal makes life particularly difficult, I think, for Derek McInnes's side, but of course anything can happen. Would you anticipate that Kilmarnock will put up quite the same fight, or would you fancy that this is a bit more straightforward for Copenhagen now, given that they've got that critical second goal?
I would say knowing Rugby Park and playing there on turf, I think it's not the easiest place to go to. I think especially having the chance for Kilmarnock with Europe, I think they will put in everything that they can, and that's why Copenhagen, they can relax, even though that they think they have this 2-0 lead. Especially also coming from a game in the weekend now where they lost to FC Midtjylland, were losing a game after 30 minutes, 3-0. So it just shows that Copenhagen, even though they have had the results in the league so far, not this one, but so far, and been kind of close to Europe, it just hasn't been running as smooth. And there's kind of voices in Copenhagen around the Danish media that kind of puts the Danish coach on a bit of pressure. So this is a very key game for Copenhagen.
That's obviously something that Kilmarnock can try and use to the advantage then. If there's been a bit of noise about Copenhagen, obviously huge expectations on them, and given just the fact that they are seasoned European performers, I'm sure the expectancy would be that this would be straightforward for them.
It is 100%, and that's why kind of they know that they also have a job to go and have done. But it's always tricky in these games. You kind of struggle, but you also know in your kind of core that they need to be in Europe after this game. But again, playing against an underdog is always tough, and that's why it's going to be interesting to see this game and see what it ends up with. It's probably going to be Copenhagen advancing, but I don't think it's going to be straightforward.
What was the reaction just within the Danish media to that first leg? What did they make of Kilmarnock?
No, everyone was kind of a bit surprised in the sense of how well they actually were organized. But knowing Derek, I think it's not a question of that. I think they should have known that with a manager like that, with the experience he has, I think they would show a performance like they did. But of course, it's the media in Denmark is very tough on Copenhagen always, and just kind of managing winning 2-0 and 1 goal in the overtime, it's not good enough. So they got a bit of criticism.
Obviously, a bit of intensity, something that you would be familiar with at Celtic. I would imagine it would be very similar. But what, if Kilmarnock were to get an early goal, it might just make things particularly interesting.
That's what I think people are hoping for, especially the Kilmarnock fans. I think if they could get that early goal, it could set up a little bit of a nervous Copenhagen. They are kind of, it's a weird one right now that they have spent so much money. They have the players. They have brought in Thomas Delaney from Sevilla, who is a national team player, just retired actually yesterday. But they have all these great players, but it just haven't been running in that kind of smooth way as they hoped for. So that's why I think anyone in Copenhagen is on the edge right now, kind of need that to get over the line, and maybe Kilmarnock can make that stunner and do something.
Do you still feel a little bit defensive about Scottish football? Sometimes we know that the perception outside of the country might be a bit sniffy towards the game here, but do you still feel quite defensive of it?
I would say I always try to kind of take sides when I can. Of course, I'm a Dane, so for the Danish football, it's better to have Copenhagen than Kilmarnock. So of course, I would root for Danish football. But in the sense of when Scottish football is doing well, I saw Hearts also in as a Europa League qualifier. So it's great to see other clubs than just Celtic and Rangers performing and trying to get Scottish football on the maps. Even though it's there, but it can always improve. But I still think like the fan base and all these things are better in Scotland than it is in Denmark for sure.
I'm sure Kilmarnock will be keen that those fans make their voices heard and try and create an atmosphere that's intense and as unwelcoming as possible for Copenhagen on Thursday night.
They have to put everything they can up for that kind of fight and hope for the best. But it's always that synergy between the players and the fans that can get you going, and an early goal as we talked about, and then the fans behind them, then anything can happen in football. We know that after all these years.